probably better without that little microphone in your hands, yeah? Because you won't pull it close to your mouth like that. That was just as funny, wasn't it?
Should have won in 2024, you know? I'm starting to think this Slow Dive was actually the best album of 2024.
I'm not even really a fan of Slow Dive.
And now, the Baphomet Grant Your Wish Foundation presents the 5th annual extravaganza that is the Cacophony Sessions Album of the Year.
The wait is over, the scores have been counted, and the team has been haphazardly assembled. Yes, the CAC is back, baby. Welcome, Cacophants, new and old, to the annual shit show that is the Cacophony Sessions Album of the Year episode. For 2024, we've taken all the new hot records of the year and disregarded them carelessly as we present you our favourite 10 albums of the last 12 months. My name is Golden E-Pump, but you can just call me Dan Whitell, like everyone else. Let's see which of my former podcast colleagues I can find down the back of the sofa. Who have we got here? It's Jim.
Years ago, the ancient Egyptians worshipped felines because they thought they were funny.
They are pretty funny. A face we haven't seen in a few months. It's Tom.
It was a Roman salute, honest.
Oh my God.
Come on.
Very good, Tom. Yeah,
So
all right.
wasn't, by the way. Just I'm not condoning his behaviour, but somebody had to make a political reference at some point, and it was going to be me, wasn't it?
And we haven't seen this face since the last time we had Cillian Murphy make an appearance on the channel. Ladies and gentlemen, returning to the show, it's Martyn.
Hi, I'm Martyn. And I recently lost a lot of people, so my career as a Mount Everest Sherpa guide ended quite quickly. Come on, man. For fuck's sake.
Oh, man. Giving us
No,
a
dear.
mountain to climb there.
Let's pull it back.
A mountain.
Oh, man. Yeah, there's a reason we haven't done this in 12 months, I think.
Yeah.
So what did we used to do? I'm pretty sure there was a warm-up exercise that we used to do to get everyone in the right frame of mind to start talking about music. Oh, yeah, it's time for Does It Slap in 2025.
Don't you hate a podcast where the jingles are crap? So let's take a good song and ask, does it slap?
I've got a perfect one, I think. I know Martyn will go for this because the band recently spent the weekend in the recording studio recording the new single, which will be out
Foreign Voices.
Foreign Voices. Sorry, which will be out sometime in March. This band came up in conversation multiple times between Martyn and I and the rest of the band, and we all love them. So my nomination is Underdog Save Me by Turin Brakes.
100% right in there. Yeah, beautiful song.
Yeah, that's the...
Absolutely perfect, 10 out of 10.
Was that the big single
That was
from...
the big single off the first album.
I do like that one. I'm happy to accept that one.
It was very good.
I've got one, and again, it's an older one. I don't think I've mentioned it before. Yeah. It's Life's What You Make It by Talk Talk.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Isn't that from Colour of Spring?
I think it is,
I think that one's...
I've been listening to some Talk Talk lately.
I'm just going to confirm that
just...
before the fact checker gets me in the editing.
It is from the Colour of Spring, yeah.
Talk Talks, yeah, Life's What You Make It was one of the singles from Colour of Spring, which is, I think, my favourite Talk Talk album, and maybe my favourite album of 86 other than Parade. It rivals Parade for me. It's a really good album. So, yeah, I'm definitely having that one.
That and Spirit of Eden, those two albums together are perfect.
The last two, yeah. Spirit of Eden. No, Laughing
Stock's later, yeah.
Laughing Stock's the last one.
Laughing Stock is my second favourite. I prefer that one.
That's the one they recorded in darkness. Yeah. They had loads of musicians in.
It's the one that is commonly attributed as one of the major influences on post-rock, is Laughing Stock.
Yes.
I mean, I still love It's My Life because it's cheesy and fun and fantastic. Yeah. But
it's a beauty.
But yeah, okay, there's no Talk Talk on the list. This is a good track. Yeah, it's going on.
I do not know this song or this band.
Deny. But you need a learning opportunity. Opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jim, why don't you have a crack?
Yeah, you do need to.
Right. I think this is an absolute dead cert. Where the Slime Live by Morbid Angel.
By Morbid Angel.
Is it not on the list already?
No, I've never allowed it. However, right?
Imagine if we put it on without Al here.
You'll notice, keen viewer, that Al is not here on this episode. He's a regular fixture and still going to be appearing on the pop episodes. However, when it came time to do this, he did say he's only listened to 2 records all year, which kind of disqualifies him from being on an Album of the Year podcast. I would love to put Morbid Angel on the list, though. And funnily enough, Anthony Fantano in his Classic Suite did a Morbid Angel album review. It got me thinking, should I go and listen to some Morbid Angel? The answer was yes. I listened to 1989's Altar of Madness, and it was quite good. I enjoyed it more than Where the Slime Live. If we pick a different Morbid Angel song, maybe, but not that one.
This does not please me.
Rights. I'm gonna go for a song that I don't think we've spoken about. Live in Colour, Cult of Personality.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll go.
It's a classic.
That's really cool.
It's a classic. It's not their best song by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just a banger. Undeniable banger. And certified so.
Very influential as well. Extremely influential on the early 90s genre mashing alternative rock, and helped bring black rock music into awareness. Yeah, very influential. Great song.
And Vernon Reid, incredible guitarist. Corey Glover, incredible vocalist. Any more?
I've got a real one.
You've got a real one.
I knew Where the Slime Live wasn't going to be accepted.
Oh, he's kept one up his sleeve. I like it.
I've got Monkey Man by Toots and the Maytals.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
I don't know if
it was also covered by the Specials, I think, on their debut album.
I don't know.
I think it was, yeah.
Is it like First Wave Ska?
Yeah.
Yeah, then I'll definitely like it because I love that genre so much.
You do know it.
Yeah. We played the Dublin Castle earlier this year, and while we were hanging about before soundcheck and that, in the main bar area, they were just playing loads and loads of First Wave Ska, and it was just seemed so appropriate, and I was fucking loving every second of it. It was just brilliant, man.
Yeah, Ska's great for just a good feel-good atmosphere, especially when you're watching some live music. Not a lot of ska in the charts in 2024, though.
No, I don't think I listened to any ska.
2024 for me was the best year in music since, I'd say, 2016, but it's probably better than 2016, so I'd have to go back to about 2004. Best year for me in music for about 20 years. So it's really good to be actually recording a podcast when I'm enthusiastic about all the records. Whether or not I'll be so enthusiastic about the ones that we picked as a collective, don't know. But I thought it was a really good year, especially for pop, hip-hop, lots of good records in metal, good jazz records, a lot of good soul records. How did everyone else find this year?
It wasn't as good for me. 2019 was one of the best years we've ever had. My favourite album of all time, Sleep Token, one of the best years for music in living memory. And I think I had a really good year in music in 2023. This year, I didn't find as strong as 2023, but there are there's a handful of albums that I absolutely loved. Although embarrassingly, my Spotify Wrapped, my number one listened to album of 2024 is not in my nominations. It was Middle Kids' Faith Crisis Part 1.
Yeah, you were all about that in our kind of mid-year review.
It's a great album, and I can play it at work, which is also good. It's a great album, but it's really cheesy. And it's like, when I do Album of the Year, I want to put something with a bit of gravitas in.
You want to look a bit more pretentious.
We all love cheese, Tom.
One of the albums that I put in is possibly the most pretentious album of the last 20 years as well.
I don't even know what one you're referring to.
The one that's 81 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's actually, no, because Liturgy was more pretentious than that, and I loved that album. And so 2023, I had Liturgy. This year, I had Middle Kids, I listened to a lot. I also listened to Aaron West and the Roaring Twenties in lieu of Flowers. I listened to that a lot.
I was waiting for that on the list. I like that record.
I love that album.
I thought it was really good.
I loved that album as well, but something just stopped me putting it on the list, and I don't know what it was. I just had this kind of block at the death. I think it's because there was an album that came out this year that is probably in my top 5 of all time. That's on my nominations, and it won't make the top 10, but it's in my top 5 of all time.
If you're wondering why I'm being a little bit vague with it, it's because I know all the answers. I have collected all the scores, but the other guys have no idea, which always makes it a lot more fun for me.
Yeah, it's torture.
And it should keep you on tenterhooks at home as well.
Yeah, it's torture. I think there were some other good records, but I had a similar problem. I think it was in 2021 or 2022, when a lot of bands released albums that I'd liked the ones before, and then I got the album, and it was a little bit disappointing. Chelsea Wolfe, her record was great early in the year.
Yeah,
but
I enjoyed that.
It doesn't hold up to the stuff she did before. Their record was great, but for me, it didn't hold up to the stuff they did before. There was a debut from Crawlers that I was all about earlier in the year. Half of it's amazing and half of it's kind of a bit dull.
I thought it was a bit patchy.
Yeah, it's patchy. When it's great, it slaps, but it's a bit patchy. Oh, and the obvious one I've got to bring up, the one I've got to bring up because I dropped it off my nominations right at the end, was Julie Christmas. I saw her live in the summer and she's absolutely fantastic live. And if you get a chance to see her, go, because she's electric on stage. But I think the more I listen to that album, again, it's a patchy album. There's moments of it, like the opening track is like post-metal Bjork, and you're like, I'm in for something great here. The reason I marked it down is the more I listen to it, the more the kind of traditional alt rock bits appear out of this fog. And you're like, oh, I'm not sure I can deal with this so much anymore. Lovely album. The first time you listen to it, it'll blow your mind. The second time, it probably will. The 20th time, you'll be thinking, oh, that's a little bit too much Pearl Jam in that. But
Martin's like, no, obviously not.
Well, my 2024 kind of felt similar to Tom, really. It was a lot of good albums, fine albums, like very little that blew me away. And in previous years, I've struggled to whittle, no pun intended, my albums down to just the 3. And obviously we picked 4 each this year. Yeah. And it was a struggle to get to 4 for me because so many albums didn't do enough for me to be that good. And yeah, like Tom said, lots of disappointing albums.
And when I say disappointing, I don't necessarily mean it was bad. I just mean it wasn't what I'd hoped. And I think that the modern era with big bands particularly, it's very easy to fall onto the hype train. I find with bigger acts that I've followed for a long time, I'm constantly going, how does it fit in their back catalogue? Like 2024, Mono released a new album and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful record and it's probably could have made my nominations list, except that I'm holding it up against Flag Fluttered and the Sun Shined or whatever it's called, the really long name that I always forget. And the album before that's their second and third albums. And I'm holding it up against those and going, those were so visceral and exciting. And this is just pretty. And I think that's part of the problem now is with social media and knowing these albums are coming out well in advance. I build up a level of expectation for bands that I love that they can't possibly reach. And that's my problem, not theirs. They're still making great music. And other people should listen to it. Don't be put off by what I'm saying. But I think that's part of the issue that I'm finding these years. I think it's much more easy to get excited by a debut or a band you didn't know that well.
Martyn, what were your thoughts on the year overall?
I've turned into Rick Beato these days. I know I was 16 in 1990, so I was at the right age at the right time to experience one of the last greatest musical revolutions of all time. So the early 90s, with every genre was absolutely revolutionizing music. And apart from like maybe the early 2000s, where there was a lot of stuff going on, but it was with its eye to the past, right? I don't think we had anything. So I don't look for new music anymore. I tend to come across it. People might recommend things and say, listen to this because it sounds like that band that you really like. Yeah. Or usually it's just based on, I'll be into a band that I'll be looking up videos for on YouTube or whatever, and then the algorithm will send me to something similar. I go, oh, wow. Or even Six Music that I listen to all the time. So I'll pick something up. I don't explore new music. And also there are genres that I used to love that I don't anymore. Like hip hop, for instance, I've lost touch with it completely. Trad shoegaze, I've lost touch. Not excited about the Slowdive album whatsoever. My music taste is very, we're looking to the past. I'm a post-punk guy now. Post-punk is my religion. Yeah. Kind of nostalgia, but also I think I'm exploring a lot of stuff that I didn't explore before, maybe because it wasn't heavy enough. When I was into grunge, I ignored some of the more indie stuff because it wasn't heavy enough. So I've come across a few things last year that have absolutely blown my mind. Every year I have a new favorite band, and last year I found a new favorite band who have been around for a long time and are now splitting up, unfortunately.
Away.
That's what I'm all about. Remember I was banging on about Failure for all the time. Yeah. It was that kind of thing where they've been around a long time, and then I discover them at a point in their career, and I've got so much more to discover. Same happened with so many bands. But yeah, that's the thing. I think because there's so much music in our history, so much that it's overwhelming. I think I don't really have time. But then there'll be these odd bands that come into my consciousness. I fucking adore post-punk from the very beginnings of the late 70s right through to now. There are still new bands coming up. It's a genre that could easily get tired, like shoegaze. But the bands that are around at the moment are really great. So one of the bands that I dropped off of my list were a band called Gurriers.
Oh, yeah.
And they're Irish, and they're from Dublin. And yeah, they just hit hard. It's very... bit like Idols, if Idols were good. A bit heavier than Fontaines.
Yes.
That's a Mercury nominated.
Shit.
I don't care. I don't like them.
hate
They're
it.
bollocks.
I didn't hate it. It didn't make my worst 10 of the year.
I think if they were a person, they'd be that top-knot fucking hipster that walks into a party thinking everyone loves them. But Gurriers, man, fucking great.
Yeah.
It's all about the edgy guitar and the broad Irish vocals and stuff. Political lyrics, it's my cup of tea. That's
Irish bands with edgy guitar. Isn't that just you two?
Well, yeah, I love you too. What can I say?
I think I've had a lot more time to digest a lot more new music than some of you guys. As somebody who's made it his mission to listen to as many genres that I wouldn't normally listen to, I've actually found that this year has been really stacked. I scored 120 albums, and I think of those, 105 of them scored 6 or above. More often than not, if I put a record on this year, I've enjoyed it. We'll go through some honourable mentions. Knock Loose, really good record.
Yes.
You won't go before you're supposed to.
That was a great record.
That made my top 20. Certain Limitations by Luke Temple, who's an indie artist. That was a really good record. In Lieu of Flowers, Aaron Rest and the Roaring Twenties. Negative Spaces by Poppy. I thought that was really good. Produced by Jordan Fish, who used to be in Bring Me the Horizon. Really good record. I Lay Down My Life for You, JPEG Mafia. Wolfman, a solo project from the guy from Wolfpack, released Dot. In Waves, Jamie XX. It's Sorted by Cheekface, which was good fun indie rock. I've also got Mono Neon in there, Quoted Stereo, jazz funk release. Remy Wolf's Big Ideas, really good pop rock album, really like her. And Robert Glasper's Keys to the City Part 1, really good jazz fusion record. And Muck G, 2-star in the Dream Police. I thought that was a really good singer-songwriter album with a lot of 80s sounding aesthetic to it. So many good records. Last year's... Who
Chat Pile.
No, that was the year before. Last year's winner was 100 Reasons.
Oh, yeah, 100 Reasons.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that I had the winner 2 years running.
I can't believe 100 Reasons won it last year.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
100 Reasons are out there going, how did we win an album of the year?
Because it was
Because they're all
fun.
idiots, yeah.
Because it was
But yeah,
fun.
the year before we had Chat Pile. They released an album
Oh, yeah.
this year, which I thought was just as good. I think the only issue with it was because it wasn't as surprising as the first record. It doesn't do anything to push the boundaries further. There's a lot of records, and I think you agree with me, Tom. They're not pushing the envelope further than where their previous releases.
Sugar
But I
Horse.
still like that because it's still a good listen. It's
Well,
not.
it's still a good listen. Yeah, it's Sugar Horse released an album this year, and they were my album of the year, and I think Martyn's album of the year a few years ago. And the new album's really good, but it tapped into the mellow side of their sound, which is what most people liked. And actually, the mellow side of their sound is what I liked on the first album, but it didn't work without the brutally heavy bits for me, personally.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that it has to be a year of innovation to be good. I think that it just the consistency for me was what made it a really good year, rather than the innovation of the actual individual releases.
As answering your question as far as 2024 is concerned, I just got deeper into post-punk, man. The whole history of it. The whole history. And there's so much to explore. And I can't see this ending anytime soon.
Before we get into the list, just wanted to ask everyone what their personal favourite record was, just so we get an idea in case they don't come up, and what you do want to win this year. Tom?
My favourite album of the year, and probably in my top 5 of all time, is Foxing's self-titled album. Draw Down the Moon in 2022 was good, and this album was great. And I want it to win. It won't, but I want it to.
Nice. Concise, I like it. Jim?
Probably Radium Dolls, because it's just so silly and wonderful and varied. I bloody love that album.
Martyn?
Do you know what? I'm not really sure, because the albums that I chose, I like them all for very different reasons. But I think because... Now, look, I have a parameter of how I score, okay? So I score on several different dimensions. So first of all, Let me get my glasses on so I can read my
This is
own
a
writing.
first, everybody. Martyn taking the podcast seriously.
Well, it looks like he's designed and printed his own form.
Yeah. There's not even lenses in those glasses, are there?
Well, look, it's got one arm because they broke today.
Found them on the floor outside. These will make me look intelligent for a podcast. Yeah, go on.
God damn it, you know it. I will score based on how many songs out of the album I love versus how many songs I don't like so much. And also the whole album as a holistic whole. And whether I'm emotionally connected to it. And whether I'm emotionally connected to the band itself. And will I listen to it again? And also the recency effect. So an album that I loved in January last year, I might have listened to it so much that I don't love it so much now. So those are my parameters that I stick by to keep it as fair as possible. So with all that in place, my album of last year is the Mets one, because that band have totally infested my musical life so much. I love that band so much. Yes, Up on Gravity, which for me is the album of the year for all of those reasons. Anyone who knows me would have said, oh, you're going to say Fontaines, but I don't love every song on the album, even though I love the band dearly. And MJ Lenderman, I love that album, but I don't love every song. But the Mets one, from beginning to end, it maintains the connection for me. So it would be that one. Yeah, it's definitely not going to win. Definitely not. But I would hope, I want the MJ Lenderman one to win, if I'm honest. I know it's my choice, but I just think that album is such a breakthrough album. It's so emotionally warm. It's so beautiful. But anyway, we'll get to whatever.
There's no point in me declaring what album I want to win, because I know which one has. And I don't have the best poker face, but my top album of the year, eventually, this changed weekly. Highest rated of my nominations is GNX by Kendrick Lamar, because every time I listen to it, I enjoy it more. And I think that nothing other than maybe Brat by Charlie XCX, which I didn't nominate, nothing really captured the zeitgeist as much as that Kendrick Lamar album this year. If you're not into hip hop, it's passed you by. But I really like that Kendrick Lamar album.
For anyone listening that doesn't listen to Six Music regularly, Round Table is a program they do where they get a load of slightly famous musicians on and listen to songs and then talk about them afterwards and score them.
It's almost kind of like this.
But better.
With actual people you want to listen
with
to.
actual people
With people whose opinions the public respects.
Oh, no.
It's
Come
this
back.
with the ability to pay the license to play the track to you.
Before the top 10 is revealed, please, everyone, give the video a like and make sure to subscribe for more content. All sorts of various and wonderful videos going on all year. What's in 10th position, Jim? Let's find.
Let's find out.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Well, I don't like to say it at appropriate times.
Just say it all the time and then I can just edit
Let's
around
find
it.
out.
Let's find out. 10th position, scoring 30.5 points. This is a Brisbane band, formerly known as The Strippers. It's one of Jim's picks. It's a band called Radium Dolls, who he's just mentioned.
Yes.
And the album is called Legal Speed. Jim?
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about this record.
Yeah, it's a very fun album. It's mostly around the kind of punk area, isn't it? But I feel like there's so much variety on this album. You've got your kind of fast, absolute belters. You've got quite a few ballady songs, strays into almost indie at points, I feel.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's probably just a stereotype at this point. But with it being a Australian band, I was expecting the Chats kind of thing.
Yeah, there's the same sort of silliness, isn't there? But then there's
the
less
opening
silly
track,
bits.
Legal Speed, I thought, okay, we're just going to get a silly, hard-hitting, punky album about silly things. But it does go more beyond that. They've got a hit song, which is your indie dance tune. There's a bit of a funk groove to it. They do go off on more avenues than
And then you've
the
got
Chats
like
do.
CIA has a completely different feel. And it's, it's silly, but it's so different. And I just very much enjoy the singer's delivery. He is pretty on point for the whole album.
I really enjoyed this album. I enjoyed it a lot. I scored it quite high. I enjoyed it in the same way that I enjoyed the Chats as well. It's got that kind of not taking things too seriously, and it's fun, and sometimes you just need that in music. And again, like Jim was saying, I expected it to be just straightforward 3-chord punk, but it's not. There's a lot of, like I said, indie post-punk elements in there, which drew me to it. And I was like, oh, that's nice. I hear a little spiky guitar line and I go, oh, wow, that's fucking cool. And yeah, so it took it out of that realm of the 3-chord punk, which I really don't like. Double bass pedal, just play as fast as you can thing is not my bag really. But this was, I enjoyed every second of it. It's a great fun listen. Don't have to think too much about it. It's really well made.
Ooh.
I love the album cover as well. The album cover's cool.
It's the lowest scoring out of I gave any record that was nominated this year.
Tom.
Yeah.
There were some moments on it I really hated. I like some of it, but I read interviews with this band and we went into the studio, we had 6 songs written and then we had 3 months to write the other 6. And you can tell
was this
which...
on monsterchildren.com?
Yeah, and you can tell which 6 it was because some of them are great. The opening track, I was like, I can see why James loves this. It sounds a bit like a dark, denser version of The Chats. And his vocal, I agree, is great. It sounds a bit David Byrne-esque at times, particularly when he does the spoken word bit.
Yeah,
but,
hit song reminded me of
But
Talking
there's
Heads a
some
little.
moments that are just... So, for example, Casino, the whole chord sequence is knocking on heaven's door for the entire thing. Asphalt Superstar sounds a bit like a Nick Cave B-side, and I don't like Nick Cave that much. And then there's another song, which is Long Island. It's 12-bar blues, which is my least favourite music. I'd rather listen to Run the Jewels than 12-bar blues.
I would rather listen to Run the Jewels than most things. But...
Yeah, but I hated Run the Jewels, didn't I? And so there's some moments that are pretty good, but there's those moments, NAA, is it, or NA? The chord sequence in that is exactly the same as Reptilia by The Strokes. Exactly the same the whole time. And it's where I can hear they've shamelessly ripped off other bands at times. And it's only 6 tracks. Like, you'll notice I've just listed 6 songs that all shamelessly rip off something else. And there's 6 other songs in there that are really good and sound David Byrne-esque or Fontaine's DC-esque, you know.
I actually liked 6 tracks on the album. I've got here. Legal Speed, Wandering Eye, CIA, I Think Your Boyfriend Likes Me Too, Long Island, and Hit Song were the 6 that I liked.
Yeah, it was Long Island's the one I really... So yeah, there are moments, and I think, because I'd heard 12-bar blues and I went negative, because instantly I hate a record as soon as I hear 12-bar blues. So I went and started looking at what other reviewers thought just to make sure I wasn't being a twat. And I know James thinks I am now. I found
if you're into Legal Speed, it's fine.
Yeah, I liked that track. But it was like 6s and...
No, say you're into Legal Speed.
No, because I'm not... It mostly got around 6s and 7s out of 10 with a few 10s from like superfans. And I think that was about right. I think they'd be great live because they released a live version of the album. That actually sounds really good. Yeah, it just didn't do it for me, I'm afraid. Sorry.
I scored it at 7.7, above average. I have 7.5 as my, like, if you're below there, you're not a great album. If you're above a 7.5, I'll probably return to you at some point in the future. So it's not a bad release. I did like the aesthetic of some of the songs. I agree. I think that half of the songs on the record are really good and half of them could have maybe done with a bit more work. I thought it was going to be silly all the way through, and it isn't. And I think that I read the interview where they said that they changed their name from the Strippers to Radium Dolls because they wanted to basically be taken more seriously. And it's almost like they may have made that decision halfway through making the album because they made these silly songs as the Strippers and then changed their name to Radium Dolls and have come up with these other songs that got a bit more to them.
I admire trying to mix it up on a record. I do. And I like listening to an album that mixes it up. It's just that once it mixes it into something I don't like, it's hard for the album to rescue it, particularly when it does it in the second half. I'd say I didn't give it I don't think it's a bad album. I don't think there were any bad albums on the nominations.
No, a 6 is still not a bad
I'd still
score
say
in the
6 is, so I go 5 is okay, 6 is okay into good, 7 is good, 8 is really good, 9 is great, and 10 is masterpiece. I tend to, that's the old IGN scale. So I don't think it's a bad record at all, and I think anyone who listens to it will have a good time with it. It's just that there were moments in it that I didn't like, and there's a few albums that will may come up that there are moments I didn't like as well.
Next up is one of my picks, and this is an LA synth pop duo. They are Misha Tenenbaum and Matt Lewin, and together they are Magdalena Bay. This year they put out a semi-concept album called Imaginal Disc, and I thought it was one of the bolder releases of the year, especially when you compare it to what they've been making previously with a lot of indie pop songs. It was very musically accomplished. The production is absolutely incredible. About half of the songs are really catchy, and the other half are probably are really well textured and quite ethereal and just sound great. One of my favourite records of the year. I scored it a 9.3, which is third favourite album of the year. I've talked about several of the tracks on the video I recently put out, which was my most listened to songs of 2024. And a lot of the singles from this, Image, Death and Romance, Love is Everywhere, they've just been going round and round in my head for months and months, and they don't get any worse. So I have to just listen to them, get them out my system, have it go around for a few days, and then put it on again, maybe a day or two later to get my fix. Wonderful record. What did everyone else think?
I thought it was quite good.
I really like.
No,
Sorry,
go ahead,
you go,
Mark.
Jim.
Go ahead.
No, you go
right,
ahead.
Fine.
You go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. It was mostly very catchy stuff. I enjoyed it from a musical perspective. However, for a large part of the album, the vocals ruin it for me because it's breathy voiced woman going.
Yeah,
it just ruins songs for me.
Yeah, it doesn't ruin songs for me.
I'm
makes
all
a
in
lot
on
of
that.
songs for me.
I like middle kids, and that's female breathy vocals a lot of the time. I actually thought that the vocally, there's a lot of the time she sounds a little bit like Kylie Minogue in the late 90s.
It's very Kylie Minogue. Little bit Alison Goldfrappy.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's definitely got the inflection of "Can't Get You Out of My Head" era Kylie Minogue, which is actually early 2000s.
I dig that record, so that's why I was really into this. I like late 90s Kylie, Impossible Princess era with Some Kind of Bliss. Great track. James Dean Bradfield at that as well, I think.
I really like this record. I think it's my favourite of your picks. There's some really clever musical references in it that I really liked, because there's that, which is the track Cry For Me, where they're actually deliberately inverting the chords from ABBA's Dancing Queen.
Gives you this weird nostalgic gone wrong feel, yeah.
There's a lot of really neat touches, and there's some bangers like That's My Floor. That gives me real vibes of, is it Sugar Babes Freak Like Me? It's like that, but with a whimsical nature to it. Although apparently it's stealing loads of samples from Lana Del Rey's video games, but I didn't notice that when I was listening to it. But in the reviews, apparently they're saying, it uses...
Yeah, no, I didn't pick that up.
No, but there's loads of moments in it. I got a lot of a feel of Saint Etienne, even though it doesn't actually sound like Saint Etienne at all. I just got this vibe of that through the whole thing.
Early Saint Etienne, who's on the phone, that kind of thing, with the whispery vocals, but the big, heavy dance house kind of style. Yeah.
That's where, and I think the NME review says, describe this album as kaleidoscopic and overproduced in all the right ways. And I think that's their kind of kitchen sink style of making music, where they just throw everything at it. Let's put a glitch in here. Let's throw a little weird note in there. Yeah, I'm all for that.
Hyperpop does that a lot with, we had 100 Gex a couple of years ago, we were doing that. Yeah. And I noticed that even in hip hop, it's become a thing now. JPEG Mafia, and when he put out that album with Danny Brown as well, just random samples that are just there. It doesn't serve any purpose rhythmically or melodically. It's just there to go, oh, that's a cool reference. It's almost like the Family Guy cutaway joke of music, which could go too far.
This album doesn't.
They can't rely on that.
This album doesn't go to.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, it's great. And you mentioned before when we spoke briefly yesterday, Tom.
This album has the worst story of a concept album ever. So I read the concept of this album before I listened to it, which is a really big mistake. So I'm just
always a mistake.
Yeah. So I'm going to ruin this album for everybody who hasn't listened to it yet. So the concept behind this album is that human evolution occurs as a result of being upgraded by laser discs. It makes no sense. And I can't hear where the concept is in most of the music, apart from there's an instrumental interlude called Insert Laserdisc or something.
It doesn't permeate it so much that it distracts you. It's just there with vague illusions in the lyrics. Imaginal disc, the actual term itself, comes from insects when they transform from the larvae into their adult bodies, and they have these discs that are already there when they're in the pupa stage or whatever it is. Don't know insect biology.
Why not?
People aren't coming here to hear me talk about ants. I'm not putting
stick
the
to
ant
Adam
in,
and the ants.
Yeah. I'm not putting the ant in cacophant. No. Might edit
No,
that
cut
one.
that.
But yeah, so
It was worth a try.
It's all about having everything there and then it just being unlocked via evolution. In this case, putting a compact disc into your forehead to turn you into the next level of human being. A couple of the music videos follow this theme as well. It's all very strange, but I just think that the songs are likable and it's accessible enough that you can get past it. It doesn't matter so much. It's not the aim of the album. The aim of the album is to have a good time and produce bangers, not tell a weird story. But if you're interested in weirdness, then it's there. Martyn, your thoughts?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. And I'm a massive Goldfrapp fan. So it really fell into that whole retro future pop thing, which I adore anyway. And the production on it was impeccable. I've got them in notes here. The piano and Death and Romance really got me. I fucking loved it. I just loved it. I was like, that's beautiful. And the voice, to be honest, there's not much I can add that all of you haven't already said, but it's a great album and it's definitely in my will listen to again list.
You could say that in our discussion of it, we hit the nail on the head.
You hit the nail on the head.
Thanks. I set them up, you knock them down.
You set them up, I hit them down with the hammer like a nail on the head.
Magdalena Bay scoring 30.8 points, which was only 0.3 ahead of Radium Dolls. There's not a lot between these, so don't pay too much attention to the scoring. They're all good albums, mostly. In 8th place was an American band who were formed in 2011. It's really difficult to classify this band and put them in a genre. Some people would say that they are post-rock. Some people say that they are indie. I guess it's a little bit post-hardcore. There's a lot in this album. It's one of Tom's picks, as you can probably imagine. It's their 5th album, and it's their self-titled album. This is Foxing with Foxing.
Yeah, this is one of my favourite albums of all time. It's my album of the year by a very long way. This band, they wrote it, recorded it, mixed it, produced it, released it all themselves. It's like the definition of DIY. It's a really ambitious record. They managed to incorporate a huge number of styles, even within single songs. The opening track, Secret History. Foxing released an album in 2022 called Draw Down the Moon, which narrowly missed out on my nominations at the time. And that did this similar thing where it starts with a really quiet intro and then throws in the post-hardcore screaming and then goes back to mellow and then it turns into this kind of fist-pumping Midwest emo anthem. And then I heard somebody describe track 2, Hell 99, as like the emo break stuff, which I thought was great. There's just loads of moments. So they've got Greyhound, which is like Tame Impala meets The Weeknd, but with a post-rock breakdown. My favourite track of the year is the song Barking, track 6. It's like the vocals hint at like Beirut and Arcade Fire. And then there's that sort of 80s harpsichord-esque synth. It's just beautiful. The vocal delivery's fantastic. At times he goes into a bit like Rob Lowe from 90 Day Men with that kind of verging on out of tune bit.
I thought you meant Rob Lowe, the actor.
No, there's a singer called Rob Lowe who was the singer in a band called 90 Day Men who released an album called Panda Park, which is one of the most important math rock albums ever. It's amazing. And then they've got Dead Internet, which has guitar work, very kind of Johnny Greenwood-esque guitar work. This album, for me, is absolutely perfect. There isn't a wasted moment on it. I see how people wouldn't get into it, but I think I've listened to this album probably, it's been in my car for months, so I'm probably into 70 or 80 times through now, and I'm just not sick of it. It's just great. 53 minutes of perfect. There's funny stories about the making, like them having fist fights in the corridors of the studio. And the guitarist who mixed the whole record on his own describes himself as hate mixing several of the tracks because he was so fed up with mixing. And it just makes this really immediate, raw record with lots of touches of other very polished music that's out there.
I really like this. I scored it an 8.2. So it would get an A in my book. It's an A-tier album. I'm always a bit reluctant when something is described as having a lot of different styles because it can sometimes just be a big mess. And I got to track 3, Spit, and I was like, hang on, are they effectively sounding like Frank Ocean on this track?
Yeah.
He does. He sounds like Frank Ocean. I was like, how has it gone from metalcore breakdowns in the first track and some screaming, and then all of a sudden I'm listening to some R&B, but it doesn't feel forced or here is the R&B song. There's a natural progression between the songs, and not everything is executed perfectly, but more often than not, tracks like Dead Internet is, as you mentioned, really guitar-based and great work on that. So there's something there for everyone. I thought it was varied enough. It's ambitious, but it's not pretentious.
Yeah.
At least that's how I felt with it anyway. It's not po-faced, it's not deadly serious all the time. There's quite a lot of fun in there, and there's a lot of energy. And yeah, I really like this record.
Yeah, I dug it as well. I only heard it for the first time last weekend in probably the best circumstance I could hear it. So me and Tom were driving down to record our next single, and driving down through Cornwall on the way to record a song with my band. I was already in a good mood, but to listen to it in the car with Tom, who just highly rates this, obviously, as he just said, was just a nice experience, because we were able to talk about stuff as we were listening to it, like we're pointing things out about the album to each other on the way to a recording studio. It was perfect. And I would agree with everything Tom says about this album. And there's not really much more I can add other than, yeah, it's absolutely incredible. I'm usually put off by any vocals that sound slightly emo. I'm immediately put off, but not in this case, because it goes beyond that. There's elements of that in there, but it never stays. His vocal range and delivery and choices of how he presents his vocals reminded me of Mike Patton.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like Mike Patton, but it's that kind of Mike Patton will refuse to stay in one place and go do the same thing. And there's, like Tom said, there's areas where he's no perfect, but then will almost break out of tune, and it works. It brings humanity to his vocals. Instrumentation, spot on. The fact that this was self-produced, it makes it even better for me. My ultimate dream would be for me and my band to spend a few months in a recording studio. We'd come out with Broken Bones and Black Eyes, probably. To be able to do that and sit in a studio together for a few months and just record something and come out with a piece of work like that would be, that would be life goal reached. So yeah, absolutely incredible album. I scored it very high. And yeah, I'm surprised it didn't get higher, to be honest with you. I'm a little bit surprised.
I think we know why.
There's a reason why. In comes Mr. Tank.
Bring it on,
the first
man.
time I listened to this album, I did it in 2 sittings because I was in work, and I finished listening to it and thought it was really good. And then I went back and listened to it again a few days later, and I listened to the whole thing. There's something about the second half of it, it just massively drops off. For me, like, probably the first half of the album is worth listening to, which then brings me on to my problem with the first half of the album, which, Secret History, part of that song is absolutely fantastic, and part of the song is absolutely fantastic, but they've just taken 2 songs and just spliced them together. And it's
the beat switch.
It's almost like the split album that Chatpile and Postal Service never made. It just flits between these two completely different genres. And the problem is, both of the things that it does are good. I just find them intolerable together.
It would be like having a nice steak, but also having a nice bowl of ice cream, and then you put them together, and it's like, I don't want to eat this. I don't want vanilla steak.
A trifle with chicken nuggets instead of
I like
things.
it together. I can see why you wouldn't like it. Because they only genre mash like that on the opening track. It's only the opening track where they really mash it together like that. And for me, it works because they've done it on most of their other records as well. So I expect it now.
It would be like, sorry, to get back on the analogy.
A trifle with chicken nuggets. I can't get past that. Trifle with
I
chicken
quite
nuggets.
want to try that. It would be like going to a kebab shop and then when they say, what sauce do you want on it, being like, can I have a can of Rio? I want Fanta orange on my cheesy chips, please. Yeah, so that's a great analogy. In 7th place, and not quite as obscure as Foxing, this is one of Martyn's picks, and it's a band that you'll definitely have heard of because this was the surprise release after, 16 years from The Cure, Songs of a Lost World. If there's one thing you can say about this record, it sounds like a Cure album.
Yes.
It's back
Yes,
to
it does. Yes.
The Cure. I love it. I think it's really good. It has all the elements that I loved from Disintegration, where the songs take way longer than they should to actually come in, and the vocals start and they're building up the atmosphere with each song. It's there again. I prefer it to a lot of their albums. I think this is probably my third or fourth favourite. I think Pornography is my favourite. Then I think it's Disintegration. Then I think it may be this one. I mean,
That's high praise.
They've done some great records, but I really love this. Alone, Drone No Drone, great tracks that add lots to their catalogue and keep them relevant, I feel. And Robert Smith's vocals, it's like he's never been anywhere. It's like he's been kept in a hyperbaric chamber for 20 years.
This is the thing for me. The Cure, as you would have guessed by my music taste, they're in my DNA, and I've grown up with them. You've got Joy Division and the Cure, Susie the Banshees, the magazine. They're year one for me, and everything after that they've influenced. Disintegration is my favourite album, and as soon as I heard the first track on this, I was absolutely gone. They've gone back to Disintegration era, which is my favourite era. Which is it's got the melancholy, but it's also got the beauty. Whereas Pornography is melancholy, but it's brutal melancholy.
I love that album. It's
so great,
harsh.
man. But with Disintegration and even Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, they brought in a lot more kind of lush instrumentation. With this, they've done that, and it just sounds like that era of Cure, but with modern production. The bass, like on Drone No Drone, the bass on that is absolutely phenomenal. It's one of my favourite.
It's Simon Gallup, isn't it? He's so instrumental to their good stuff, I feel.
Absolutely. And they're one of those bands, I think if you take any member of the band out, they don't sound as good. And they're just the fact that they're all in their 60s, got to be approaching 70 now.
I think a couple of them are younger because they've not been with the band.
Oh, yeah. One of their members isn't young. The guitarist is not the original guitarist, but the guitarist
Reeves Gables.
Yeah, who I first discovered, he plays the guitar on the Stigmata soundtrack with Billy Corgan in about 1997. Having already
he was in Tin Machine as well.
He was in Tin Machine with Bowie, and then he did Bowie's, which is crap, by the way. Then he did Bowie's solo records in the 90s, which
are not the best.
They're not the best, but
Outside's a good record, and I like Earthling.
Yeah, and his guitar work on that Stigmata soundtrack is really distinctive. The way he manages to play subtle stuff with an absolute shit ton of overdrive on it. And it was funny because I was listening to this and I hadn't looked at who their guitarist was. And I was listening through Alone, and you hear that guitar part come in, and I'm like, that sounds very reminiscent of a guitar player. And I was like, that's the guitar playing from the Stigmata soundtrack. And then I found out it literally is.
Nice spot.
This album sounds like how you hear The Cure when you remember them in your head.
It's like an HD remaster of an old game.
It is. It is. That's what it is like. Because I first became aware of this album because what's the single, to call it a single's a bit hard. A Fragile Thing was, I used to have Radio 2 on in the surgery because my 19-year-old nurse thought it was the best thing. And she's not allowed it anymore. And this song was all over Radio 2 for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And it's great. What I find interesting is that Robert Smith, he doesn't just sound young and reinvigorated. He sounds younger than he sounded on 413 Dream, which is 16 years ago.
And even The Cure, and I would go like Blood Flowers and things like that. He sounds way more fresh than he has done. I would argue on anything since Wish, maybe.
Yeah,
I prefer this to Wish. I think he sounds more interested on it.
Yeah. It's all those polyphenols, man. Sorry, there's a thing about Robert Smith extolling the virtues of polyphenols and red wine, isn't there? And health benefits. He had a bit of a thing about that. Or in the 80s, there was a big thing about The Cure and red wine.
He's great.
Yeah. This album it's funny because I think my knowledge, my 80s Cure stuff, I love Disintegration. But I always seem to think of them as a singles band in my head.
They've got some banging singles.
Yeah, they do.
Close to You, the
they
single
do.
mix.
They've got so many good singles that I listen to them a bit more as a singles band than an album band, even though they're not really.
They've got some good compilations in terms of the way it's structured. They're similar to the Smiths in that sometimes like you just want to listen to a compilation of hit after hit, and they're a band, The Cure, you couldn't actually do that with. Yeah. Which is surprising considering how dense their material is and how moody it is.
Moments on this, Nothing Starts Forever, the piano and strings that they start that track off sound like something out of a Stephen Schwartz musical, like Wicked or something. It's really musical theatre. there's some moments in this where there is some levity in amongst the endless melancholy. And Warzone and Drone No Drone sound heavy. They sound like 413 Dream wish it sounded. It's still, you still can tell it's The Cure, but it does sound a lot bigger than they ever used to.
Yeah, I think that there were almost like sludge elements to certain aspects of it that kind of maybe hinted that they've been listening to more stuff than they had done when they were around in the 80s. They've listened to some more 90s, 2000s.
Weirdly, the touchstone is Peter Gabriel released a solo album in the mid to late 90s that's really quite industrial and heavy. And it's later. It might be up. And Warsong and Drone No Drone really reminded me of that. It really reminded me of that in it. And yeah, I really like this record. I think my problem with The Cure when it comes to listening to a Cure album is they are prone to a bit of meandering self-indulgence.
They can meander and self-indulge all they want.
When you say you have a problem with The Cure, you sound a little bit like RFK Jr. there.
They're one of the most important bands of our lifetime, and mine's lifetime as well, because he's 20 years older.
Because this extends into another person's lifetime as well.
And I think they're going to be important for a long time to come. This is another Cure album, but seeing as they haven't done anything for 16 years, this was worth the wait.
Yeah, I just hope it's not the last one. I hope it's not. I don't think it will be.
I think they're back now. I think Robert Smith's got his mojo back. I think that they've been playing like bloody... He insists on playing 3-hour sets now, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's got a thing about fans have to get value for money and they won't charge too much for gigs. And who thought that Robert Smith was potentially going to be lined up as the saviour for modern music? You've got Oasis being cunts with dynamic ticket pricing, and you've got Robert Smith going, cheap as possible, 3-hour set, off we go.
I was always going to pick Robert Smith over the Gallagher.
So was I, but he's always been a bit prickly. Like in interviews, he's not known for being cuddly Robert Smith, is he? He is now.
He's not as miserable as his image would maybe lead you to think, because he's quite funny. There's that interview where he gets asked if he's as excited as the presenter about winning the one. He's clearly not. He's always been quite funny. And as you say, they've done a lot of pop singles, especially back in the 80s. Let's Go to Bed, for instance, is just straight up new wave. But they've never really felt out of place, even when they've done that. He's a lot more versatile than people have him down as, I think. Jim, you weren't so keen on this one as the rest of us.
I've never been
I've
never been a particular fan of The Cure. This album did surprise me. It was better than I was expecting it to be. Nothing blew me away. I'm not hugely into Robert Smith's voice. It sounded like The Cure in too much of it.
What were they supposed to sound like? Just so that we can get a bit higher up on Cacophony Sessions Album of the Year, what we'll do is we'll now put out a track where we sound like Tyler the Creator.
Well, if they'd had one on there that sounded like Tyler the Creator, I'd have probably gotten a bit of a boost.
I think it would have been, I would love to hear that. The Cure doing Judge Judy like Sticky or something, yes. I guess if you're not into that sound, though, it is just more of that sound. So it's not a scathing review, really, I guess.
No, as I say, I was expecting it to be really bad, and it wasn't. So it can go that way when somebody hasn't put an album out for nearly 20 years, because you're like, what's this going to actually sound like?
Bloodflowers was bad, and 413 Dream was all right.
I thought it was going to be like when Nicky Sixx drags himself out of a ditch and puts out some dog shit. I thought it was going to be like that.
Or just like legacy rock artists. I listened to some crap this year. Did anyone listen to the Offspring album?
Oh, it was fucking awful.
It was so boring. It was just nothing to it. It was just amateur-esque.
Every time they bring out a new album, Dexter Holland does his loop of all the media. Yeah, it's actually good. It's one of our best albums for years. And he's like, you're lying, Dexter.
Yeah. It's the best album in years if you've lost your hearing since their last record came out. This is not one of those cases, I didn't think. I think that it was, at the very least, it's a Cure record, as Tom said earlier. It's just another Cure record. So if you don't like The Cure, you're probably not going to like it that much, but it's great. We'll move on. Scoring 32.7 points. It's a little bit further ahead. We have another one of Martyn's picks. And this is a band that on Album of the Year needs no introduction because this is their third time appearing on the Cacophony Sessions Album of the Year. For 2024, it was Romance, the latest release from Fontaines DC. Martyn, tell us a bit about this album from the Irish post-punkers.
It's the Fontaines DC,
It's the Fontaines
so
DC.
it's going to be quality. And you know my love for this band. I don't really need to bang on about it. I'm not going to say too much because I could talk about the Fontaines, what I think about them forever, and it'd be boring to everyone. What I will say about it
in the edit.
is that you can do that. So I love the evolution of the band. So you listen to their first album, it is straight up, energetic, post-punk. It's quite stripped back and basic. And they gradually, with each album, developed their sound. And it's really nice when a band does that and doesn't fall off in quality. So with each album, they just got better. This isn't my favourite Fontaines album, but there's many reasons for that. But it's great in that they've developed. They're not just doing straight up indie rock songs. There's lots of different elements they're bringing in. I love the title track with the breakdown and the Mellotron. It's so fucking good. And also, you've got to mention Grian Chatton's voice. I'm a massive fan of his. One of my favourite vocal performances of all time is when he does that rant at the end of I Love You, of Skinny Fear. I adore that. There's so much passion in it. It's one of my favourite vocal performances on record. But with this, he's gone in a lot less abrasive way. There's a lot more falsetto. There's a lot more tunefulness. It's more kind of tasteful singing, and there's a lot more nuance to it. I hope he never loses that kind of raw, kind of shouty Irishman thing, because it's passionate and it's raw. It's authentic. And you know what I'm like about authenticity in music. The Fontaines just have it in abundance. I also think, a funny thing about their new image, though, I saw somebody mention their new image. They look like a shit EMF. I was like,
Unbelievable.
I was like, EMF looks like that in the fucking 90s. They did, with the weird hair. I like their new image. And the video to Starburster as well. It's just crazy brilliant. I think everything that they've done so far has got to this point, and I'm really interested to see where they go next. But at the moment, they are probably in my top 5 favourite bands of the moment. I adore them. And long may they continue to reign, because they are becoming one of those bands that have surpassed all the other bands that were bigger than them.
Yeah.
Idols, again, I'll mention. They've surpassed Idols beyond their level of talent. And it's really good to see them get the amount of recognition and the success they deserve every bit of it. That's what I have to
James
say.
Ford has rescued Fontaines DC. This is the highest
Simian
Mobile Disco. I loved Simian Mobile Disco. This
Did some Jesse
they
West.
were great.
this is the highest I've ever scored a Fontaines DC record by a
noticed that.
long way. Because I don't think I've ever given them over a 7, and I'm not much over a 7. And I went up to an 8.3 on this one. Grian Chatton, his voice has been reined in. I find it really funny how Fontaines DC have been touring with Arctic Monkeys recently. Now, Arctic Monkeys started off really full of swagger and grit and were better for it. And then they started doing the experimentation, and it's dog shit.
I agree.
Fontaines DC started off full of swagger, and I didn't like it because they sounded a bit too much like an Irish Oasis for my liking. And then they've got more experimental, but Grian Chatton's actually singing in tune, and it's beautiful. Like when I heard him at the opening of Romance, I was just like, fucking hell. I actually like Grian Chatton's voice. I never thought I'd say that because I hated it on everything else. I think the main song of I Love You is possibly one of the worst vocal performances I've ever heard. It ends all right. It ends all right, but I hated it.
I wasn't a big fan of their second album.
I hated it so much, but they're throwing a lot more in. Although I will say there are moments where I still liked it, but in the modern world, could have fit on a Coldplay album. And it could have.
Chris Martin had an interesting voice.
Yeah. And then Motorcycle Boy has a load of hints of Smashing Pumpkins. That's my
really
favourite.
Like that.
But that's the chord progression.
Favourite is my favourite. I like favourite.
Yeah. Weirdly,
Starburster, like that is Martyn mentioned that as well. Like,
Yeah.
Should we have it on the
even though
Undeniable Bangers
That's the one.
playlist?
yeah, I think we should.
Oh, that's one of the ones I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
like.
it. Yes.
I mean,
Get
like,
it
even
on
that
there,
weird,
get it on
like, breathing
Yeah,
things.
like you've
it's
got
just,
the dynamics
yeah.
of the drums, and then that gap, and then
yeah, it's just cool. I like that song.
Yeah,
And here's the thing.
Haven't
Here's
any
the thing. Is
no,
just
here's the thing
so
I'd have.
fucking
Here's
good.
the thing I'd
Right.
have, but Starburster I wouldn't. Because Starburster sounds like the bits of Fontaine's that I don't like. Whereas Here's the Thing sounds like the new stuff that I do, if that makes sense. The singing on Here's the Thing is really good. Whereas Starburster...
I did like Here's the Thing.
Yeah, it's my
I don't know
favourite
if I
on
take
the
it as an
album.
undeniable banger. But,
It's Starburster and Death Kink and Favourite. He falls back into the vocal trap that turns me off.
But that's what fits the sound, though. If he sang any other way, it wouldn't fit. It would
it's still
sound
got to
crap.
be
He
Fontaine's
needs
DC,
to do
isn't
that.
it?
It's still got to be Fontaine's
Yeah,
DC.
it's not aimed at you, Tom.
it's not for
It's
you.
not aimed at you.
It's not for me.
Yeah. But I think
It's like chicken nuggets and truffle.
But I think the key with this album and why I liked it so much is, and I think you said it, Martyn, evolution. The band have gone from A Hero's Death, where they were angry Irish band. The second album was like sad, melancholy Irish band. And this is more like charismatic, a bit of swagger Irish band with some more up-tempo, more ridiculous kind of concepts on it. And I like that a lot more. I think that it just, if you're not in the mood for droning an Irish accent about drinking in the pub and
Catholic
drugs and
priest.
stuff like that, then there's not a lot you can find. But this has more to it, I think. There's just more radio-friendly, accessible songs. And working with James Ford here shows that they're after a bit of mainstream success and they want to grow and be a bit more ambitious. That's what it seems to me, anyway.
Yeah. But then equally, whilst they're doing that, they're still sounding like Fontaine's.
Yeah,
And that's
they
what
don't-
I really like about this album.
That's the
Yeah,
point.
they haven't lost that step.
That's
of it.
absolutely the point.
Yeah. I scored this the lowest by a solitary 0.1, but I still scored it a 7.8. It's a great record. I really enjoyed this album. It's like a B plus A minus sort of thing for me. It's not really my wheelhouse, so I didn't love it to return to it all the time, like you probably did, Martyn. But when the tracks come on, I enjoy them. And yeah, today, earlier, in preparation for this, I put on Motorcycle Boy, I put on Favourite. I didn't put on Starburster because I've played it loads of times already and then ran out of time. But yeah, it's something that I will return to more so than any of their other records. So even though A Hero's Death won this back in that was album of the year 2020, I think.
Jesus,
and then
yeah.
5 years
back.
later, even though I think their record is better, it doesn't win our album of the year. But then 24, as I said, is a stacked year, guys. I think that's clearly the reason why. Yeah. Not just because we've picked other albums. There's got to be science behind this somehow. In fifth place is one of Jim's picks. It scored 32.9 points. And this is the debut album from an English indie folk band. It's quite an ambitious debut effort. It's 3 discs. It's technically 3 EPs rolled into one by the looks of it. They are called Tapir with the all-important exclamation mark. And the album is called The Pilgrim, Their God, and The King of My Decrepit Mountain.
Such a pretentious name, isn't it?
It's got, I was like, oh God, this sounds so bad reading this. But yeah, not the best album name of the year, but I did like this. It's got it 7.5. It was a above average album for me. It's a lot to take in because there's 3 different distinct parts of it. I think I preferred the first part. But then the last track, the Mountain Song or whatever it was, the last track on the very third part is really good as well.
That's great.
So there's a lot to take from this. There was Broken Ark. Was it Broken Ark? It sounds like Vincent's theme from Final Fantasy VII. And there was a couple of other things that I noticed. But yeah, it sounded like a bit like the Postal Service actually, in that there's a lot of kind of synthy drum machines and a lot of indie sounds, but a lot more intricate instrumentation.
Yeah, like a more kind of folky Postal Service. I get that.
Yeah, that's how I listened to it. I really.
I mean, the first time I listened to this album, I thought it was incredibly mediocre. So you're right about there's so much to take in. I think there were enough bits in it to make me return. And I've listened to it quite a bit now, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. There's so much interesting instrumentation going on. There's so many interesting harmonies with vocals, and lyrically, melodically, vocally, I think it's really decent.
It's It's a good record. I really enjoyed it. It's my favourite of your picks, James.
Does not surprise me whatsoever.
It doesn't, because there's a lot of Black Country New Road in this record.
I also thought this sounded a little bit like the Mount Erie record that you nominated as well.
But the Mount Erie
we may or
record,
may not speak about.
I don't think we'll speak
which
about.
Maybe coming up or not.
I'd be very surprised if we were speaking about Mount Erie. It's not as heavy as that, and it doesn't mix it up as much.
It was more like
that.
a folk version of that. I listened to them quite one day after the other.
This record, what's weird is they dropped 2 singles since this album that I like far more than anything on this album. This band are a band I'm really excited about, but you can hear it starts off as a bedroom project. The first 2 EPs have got drum machine, and then the third EP that's tacked on the end has got live drums. And the first EP starts off with acoustic bit with a guy speaking over the top who's in a band called Little Wings, who's a American folk band.
He is Little Wings. He is Little Wings. That's solo artist. Yeah.
And then it's got a sax breakdown that's straight out off a Black Country New Road record. And then it goes into On a Grassy Knoll, which is clearly that kind of bedroom folktronica. It's like Fortet, but more folk and less electro. And then there's moments where it's a little bit too clever for its own good, like Gymnopody. It's very clever in the way that they're using the chords and the sequences from Eric Satie's Gymnopody, but it actually loses something as a song because of what it's doing. That song is at its best when it's not referencing Gymnopody. And then, my God, absolutely rips off the vocal melody from Something Stupid. And then there's the chord sequence from My Girl in the middle of it. And you're like, that's very clever that they've taken that and deconstructed it, but you end up focusing on them being clever. And the Mountain song is great, apart from the fact they're humming a melody. The humming bit in falsetto is humming a melody out of Wagner. It's a Wagner melody that they're just humming. And it's because they're all music school students and they know what they're referencing and they know what they're doing. And in that respect, it's kind of jazz-esque. But the best moments are when they don't do that. So On a Grassy Knoll, they don't do that. Broken Ark reminds me of the chamber pop experimentation of a Scottish band called The Blue Ship, who made an album that is bizarre. And you should listen to it because no one's ever done anything like it. But they touch on it in Broken Ark and it's really good. And they managed to make something really heavy by putting the orchestral instruments together and taking the guitars out of it. And then at times the singer sounds like Tom York, Ike Gray, isn't it? Sounds like Tom York, particularly on The Nether, which sounds like what The Smile were trying to do on their album. So I'm so excited to see where this band go, because I think the album that they're going to make next is going to be amazing. I think it'll be a 9 or a 10. I think this record feels like 3 EPs put together, but all 3 of them are really good. All 3 of them are really good. But
I think that's why I didn't love it, because it felt a little bit disjointed, and it was also like, why is it 3 discs when it's not even the longest record?
It's to distinguish the fact it's 3 EPs recorded at 3 different times.
I can see why they did that, but I think when Martyn was saying about his parameters for how he scores, I think holistically it's not a great album. It's 3 good EPs that I listened to consecutively, which is maybe why I didn't score it as an A. But I do like it. The second track, On a Grassy Knoll, it reminded me of Weird Fish's Arpeggi by Radiohead.
Probably.
There's a band in Rainbows style.
There is a band that this band sound a lot like that Martyn might remember. I don't know if the
beta band.
Kings of Convenience.
Oh, Kings of Convenience. But the beta band scans as well. 3 EPs.
Yeah, the beta band. Yeah. The Beast Band called it 3 EPs.
Incredible.
Didn't they?
Yeah. And it's amazing. Beta Band is such an underrated band. But that's what I thought of when I was listening to this record. Now, I think it was my favourite of Jim's as well. And this is where mine and Tom's experience of music is different. Whereas Tom will deconstruct the music and, that references that. I'm going, I can imagine myself listening to this on one of my long-haul country hikes. And fucking just experiencing it out when I'm lost in the countryside. For me, the context of this album is what works for me. It's about where and how I'll listen to it and how it will soundtrack that period of time. And I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I think like I said, when I was listening to it, I was like, I just wanted to get out on a hike and listen to it.
Well, it is 3 lovely little planned walks, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm so glad that this was nominated. I'm so glad I came across this, because the next time I go out on one of my hikes, it's going on.
I think if I only took my dog for a
Nice one,
20-minute
Jim. Thank
walk,
you.
I think he'd eat me.
There won't be an album of the year next year, guys, because Tom's been eaten by his dog.
Because he tried to only do a 20-minute walk in the morning.
Could you imagine the albums we'd cover if you weren't on here?
You'd have nothing interesting to talk about.
The new Kids Bop album's really good, guys. Jim, anything to add?
No, I'm looking forward to listening to these other two singles they've released, because I haven't listened to them yet.
They're great. They're really good. They are. You can tell that they've got a record, like the third EP from the album, you could tell they had a record label and a bit of something there. The next two singles they're getting closer to that kind of acoustic folk, black MIDI, black country, new road experimentation that they hint at on these EPs. So it's really good. I'm excited. If an album does drop and they've released them as two singles and then put them together as one thing on Spotify, which normally bands do when they're releasing it as when they're doing for an album. So I'm hoping that's what this means, that this is going to be an album.
It's not my preferred genre, so it's not something I'm desperate for, but I did enjoy it. If I'm running down through new releases and it's on it, I'll give it an ad and give it a listen, but not sat on my hands waiting for it. Next up, in fourth position and scoring 33.3 points is an American act. Actually been going for quite a while, since the 90s. They're from Seattle. They returned in 2019. This is their seventh album. And this is Pedro the Lion with Santa Cruz, and it's Tom's pick.
What? So I actually didn't make any notes on this album because it was a kind of...
Well, we're screwed.
Well, no, you don't... a friend of mine, Richard Thomas, who is a poet who has quite a big social media presence, posted his 100 albums of the year. And I'd put in Julie Christmas as my nomination for my fourth slot. And then saw this 100 list and saw Pedro the Lion was on it. And I was like, how did I not notice Pedro the Lion had released an album? Because Making the Most of It was off their last album. That was my song. That was one of my songs of the year. Absolutely love that song. It's an absolute banger. But I decided I'd listen to the albums he nominated, and I put this album on. And from that initial synth intro, I was just like, fucking hell, I've made a mistake. I need to put this on my list. Because it's, whereas their previous records haven't ever tried to rock, this is kind of a concept album about how he was 13, starting high school in a new city.
There's a lot of school day stuff.
Yeah, it's part of a series about all the last few albums are referencing part of where he lived. So he lived in different places when he was a kid, and this is about being a teenager in Santa Cruz and moving there, and that's why it's named after a place, same as the album before, which I think is called Havasu or something like that.
Yeah, Havasu.
It's kind of a concept album, but he's got a beautiful voice. It's proper sadcore, isn't it? It
sounds like Mark Kozelek.
Yeah, but
completely.
If Mark Kozelek had a little bit of Chris Martin to him.
I think he's a much better technical singer than Mark Kozelek. His voice just has this emotional resonance with me, that like baritone. And this time they try and rock out a bit and it works. Teacher's Pet and Modesto.
Teacher's Pet was my favourite.
Teacher's Pet's it's beautiful.
Yeah.
From the minute this album started to the minute it ended, I absolutely loved every minute of it. There's not a bad moment on it. Yes, you cannot like it, but I think if you're in, you're in. I remember the morning I changed my nomination, Martyn on the podcast messenger group just going, fucking hell. I love this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Americana, indie rock. But
there's a lot of synth in there, though.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of synth. They play live as a three-piece with a keyboard player, a guitarist, and the singer plays drums. Dave
Bazin.
Yeah, and he plays drums and sings. He does play everything for Pedro the Lion. He plays drums and sings, and he's got this beautiful vocal, Americana, a bit of kind of Neil Young-esque rock, but his voice is this kind of beautiful, deep resonance. And he always manages to pick the melancholy chord sequence that just tugs at your heart a bit. Every song, there's a turn in it that just makes my heart bleed a little bit. I just love it.
Yeah, I think you got to go this time, Martyn.
No, you've got to go.
I went last time.
You go this time too.
Stop being so polite, Martyn. This is appalling.
What you say might mean I might not have to say something because we have similar taste in this
why don't you both just say you
this...
both hit the nail on the head and then not say anything?
Yeah, nail head, done.
Yeah. I actually couldn't say any better, Jim.
Tom said he doesn't really sound more. Did you say he's better than Kozilek?
Not Kozilek,
Technically a better singer than Mark Kozilek.
Okay, from a
I
technical
like his voice better.
I think they sound almost indistinguishable. The only difference is that, what's his name?
Dave Bazin.
DB.
DB. He's a little bit less conversational than Kozilek's ended up being in recent years. It's interesting that we've got Pedro the Lion, but we don't have. No one nominated the Sun Kill Moon album that came out last year.
No.
And that's because it's not as good as the old Sun Kill Moon stuff.
You were explaining this to me last time I saw you, I mean.
Yeah.
This is every bit as good as the old Pet
this
stuff.
is like older Kozilek stuff, but more going on, and you've got all this synthy stuff, and there's just loads of distortion. Not that Kozilek hasn't done anything with distortion, but it's just really great, catchy songs, really lovely vocals all the way through. I very much enjoyed this album.
Yeah, I got the Kozilek thing as well, but I think the difference between this, for me anyway, from this and Kozilek is because I'm familiar with Red House Painters, very familiar. I think Kozilek has a sadness and melancholy the guy from Pedro the Lion doesn't necessarily have. It's almost like Pedro the Lion's a little bit more whimsical, whereas Kozilek's talked about a guy who got burned to death in his backyard, right? Yeah. And the Red House Painters, which is all about the despair of breaking up in a relationship. And I think also what Kozilek does is he talks about the people around him in a lot more detail. So he'll have whole songs about people that he knows and stuff. And this isn't a criticism, by the way. It's just this difference I see between them. This album hit me because I'm so into this Americana stuff. It's just, in fact, I rated 2 other albums in this list above the Pedro the Lion one, and one of them is an Americana album, right? Now, I'm a sucker for that stuff. I absolutely adore it. Again, it all goes back to authenticity and emotional engagement and about stories of real people and real lives. And it might be because my teenage years were spent with grunge, which was the Northwest, which is all about that, right? The human condition through rock music. But musically, I remember, again, we listened to Foxing and we listened to most of this album on the second half of the journey, but I've heard the whole album before. And I remember almost in every song I was going, Tom, that's exactly what I would play. That's it. With the little guitar parts, there was like little triads and things. I was like, that's what I would do. That's what I would do. And that's one of the reasons I
did that with Purple Rain. I'm like,
of course you did, yeah.
I would have taken that bass out.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons the album resonated with me so much, because a lot of the musical choices, especially on the guitar, are choices that I would have made. So there's like an instant connection. So that coupled with the Kozilek kind of similarities and the fact that it's an authentic Americana, definitely one of the highest. I think it's the 3rd highest score I gave it. Great album. I'm going to listen to it a lot. I've been listening to it a lot.
Me too.
Teacher's Pet and Santa Cruz are my favourite songs on it.
Teacher's Pet was my
album. And Santa Cruz.
I wasn't the biggest fan of Santa Cruz. For me, I found this album was hot and cold in that I liked the more up-tempo ones, and then the slower ones didn't really do much for me. I think it's the genre because it's quite singer-songwriter, indie adjacent stuff. It's not really the stuff that I love.
It's not aimed at you.
It's not aimed at me, no.
I'm going to say something very controversial, but compared to one of the other albums that is definitely going to come up in the next couple of picks, I think he's a better lyricist than the other Americana album that's on the list by quite a way.
I disagree.
By quite a way.
There you go.
Because I think
I totally disagree.
Because I think he's better at telling a story rather than putting together non sequiturs.
I don't always want to hear a story.
See, I did on this record.
Sometimes I just want the emotional connection.
And I quite enjoyed the hearing a story. I think he did that very well on this record.
He did do, but it is all subjective.
I did like this record. I scored it as 6.9, so not quite a 7, but I enjoyed it. And it's one of those that I think it was just because it was not my genre. I didn't love it so much. But again, there were tracks on it, Teacher's Pet, and there was another one towards the end as well, which I quite liked. Spend Time.
Spend Time
was quite catchy. A little bit of higher pitch singing, and it was just a bit more sing along to it. I like that one. But we'll move on because we've still got 3 to go. In 3rd place, scoring 33.6, is one of Martyn's picks. This is a Canadian band,
from 2006. Band formed in 2006. Are you on that page now?
The band have been active since 2007. Formed in Ottawa. And this is their 5th studio album, released through Sub Pop. This is Mets, or Mets in all caps, because that is apparently important. The album is Up on Gravity Hill, and I really like this. This is one of the ones that caught me by surprise. Martyn, tell me a bit more about Mets and why you like it.
Okay. First off, you'll know anyone who watched the podcast or knows me as a friend. I got into Fontaines, kept banging on about them. Got into Failure. They were my band of du jour. And this is my band of this year or last year. I discovered them because I'd heard of them from a long time ago. And it was again through the algorithm they came up. And I was like, oh, let's give them a listen. And fucking blew my mind. It was like everything I love in alternative guitar, alternative punk kind of thing. So that style of punk is my kind of punk, really, when it's aggressive, but also very arty. Yeah. So it's almost, there's a Sonic Youth element to it, right? Yeah, so it's kind of like, it's scratchy, it's messy, and I fucking love that stuff. So with this, if this had been any other year that Mets had released an album, it probably wouldn't have even gone on the list because they're very abrasive, very in one sort of area. Noisily, and as much as I adore that stuff, this album is where they've become a lot more refined, and they brought a lot other elements in, and I hate to use the S word, but there are slight shoegaze elements to some of the songs. Yeah, the vocals are less shouty and they're a little bit more melodic, and you can hear a lot more of his vocal inflections, which have always been there but hidden, and now they're there a bit more. He's by no means a technical vocalist; he's a punk vocalist, right? But you can still hear real authenticity to it. And as a 3-piece, their sound is fucking massive.
He's a composer for film and TV show as well, isn't he, the singer?
Yes, he is. Yeah, he's very musically adept. But I think
so. We are talking about Alex Edkins, by the way.
Yeah, and he's great. He's an absolutely fantastic guitar player. But I've got to put props to the drummer. I've watched quite a lot of their live stuff. Their drummer, he's one of the best drummers I've ever heard in my life. Fucking absolutely incredible. He does hit it hard. You're right, Tommy.
He's like shit out of that drum.
You can only say that now. Alex isn't
here, like a metronome. Yeah, I can. Yeah. Second of Alex.
The drums really were the star of this album for me. Is what really marked it as better than I expected. Because it could have been just your alternative rock kind of album, but the drumming really gave it some sort of post-hardcore elements to it, and in certain tracks, especially the opener, because it's quite long, and like the production of it, it's not a post-hardcore song, but the production of it, the distortion, they add the snare sound that takes it in a heavier and a bit more frantic direction, which I quite liked, and they did it again on tracks like I think it was in 99 as well. Yeah. The last track, Light Your Way Home, was a bit more light, a bit more arty with Amy Webber on vocals. But it was the drumming. It was just really inventive. Yeah. The fills were really unexpected, and it just gave it a bigger and a nastier sound to it, I thought anyway.
The guitar playing is very influenced by shellac, isn't it? It's very shellac. Those kind of wonky note choices. And I was just like, I'm glad I think Martyn alluded to the fact they might have just announced they were splitting up, because I was quite excited. We had a successor to shellac, seeing as they're not going to exist anymore. For me, the album opened and it sounded like Queens of the Stone Age with the reverb dialed up to 11. And then that song, the second part of that song...
It's much better than Queens of the Stone Age.
Yeah, it is, but... There was an element in the first half of the first track, because the first track split into two, and then the second half sounds a bit more like a shoegaze take on Fugazi, and I'm definitely here for that. But I've got to balance it. I have one big complaint about this record. I really enjoyed it. Okay, and my complaint of it isn't that Light Your Way Home uses the same chord sequence as Don't Look Back in Anger by Oasis, but it does. Just for the record, it's the same chord sequence. I didn't mind that, but I just thought I'd best point out, because it will really piss Martyn off if I point that out.
Yeah, that's piss me off now.
But it's true.
We need to stop mentioning Oasis on the show.
I know, but it is the same chord sequence. I was listening to it going, I really love this song, but where's that chord sequence from? And then I went, shit, I've worked out where the chord sequence is from. And I felt bad.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's the same chord sequence. Hear the intro guitar and just go da-da-da over the top and you can do it and it's in the right key. But I really enjoyed it. There was loads of hints of shellac. There was hints of My Vitriol in the choruses with the guitar work. Loved it. Absolutely got on board with it. Gave it 8 point something, which is quite high for me. The album is really front-loaded. It loses a bit of momentum in the second half. That's quite a common criticism in the reviews. But the only thing I didn't like is that it sounds like a sub-pop album. There's this thing about sub-pop albums in the 90s, and Martyn will know exactly what I mean. That very heavy reverb sounds a bit like it was recorded in a shed thing that was Sub Pop's trademark in the 90s. And
all going for that Steve Albini kind of sound.
Some albums benefit from that, and I think this album works despite that. I think this album would sound every bit as good, if not better, if it was just cleaned up a little bit. Just a little bit less of the Sub Pop shed sound. Just a little bit less.
That's what makes this album.
I don't like the Sub Pop shed sound.
I think if it wasn't dripping in filth, then it wouldn't be anywhere near as good.
No, it's not the dripping in filth distortion I'm talking about. The distortion and that sort of filth I like. It's the fact that the vocals do sound like they were recorded in a shed. His vocals have been cleaned up on this record compared to their older records. They've been cleaned up a lot and they sound better for it. So I do wonder what it would have been like if they were cleaned up just a smidgen more. Like having gone back and listened to the rest of their discography, do you get where Martyn must get where I'm coming from? Because this album is cleaner than the other albums that they've done. It's got less of that sub pop sound, and it does sound better for having less of the sub pop sound. So I'm like, what if there was just a little bit less? Just a little bit less.
I think if there was less, it'd be too polished. I think they still need that edge. They still need that kind of fuzziness. And it's interesting you say, because one of their albums was produced by Steve Albini back in the day, which is my least favourite of their albums, ironically. But
good riddance.
I haven't stopped listening to Mets since I discovered them. I listen to them every day.
I've listened to Met since they did that Judder Man ad in the 2000s. Beware the Judder Man, my dear, when the moon is...
I remember that. Oh my God, I can't believe you remember that. The Judder Man.
Do you have any thoughts on the Judder Man or on Met?
I've no idea what you're talking about with this Judder Man.
Good.
Am I too young or just not watch telly enough?
Met's Vodka, they made like Alco-Pops, and they had this weird advert with a puppet that was terrifying. But yeah, any other thoughts on Met's? No? Yeah,
no, I thought this was a great album. I scored 8 point something?
Yeah, 8.6.
Yeah, really great album. I loved the aggression, I loved the noise, I loved the post-punk, the post-hardcore elements you mentioned. There's points on this album, especially in, I think, Never Still Again. Like, it's reminded me of Dillinger Escape Plan a bit.
Yeah.
Like, just organised chaos. And,
like Coheed and Cambria kind of at the drive-in in flourishes, but not going too deep into that kind of thing.
None of the mad sweep picking and playing in 1714.
Yeah, or there's not really that much, like, screaming.
It's more Sonic Youthy than anything.
Yeah, it's the noise rock end of the spectrum.
Noise art rock.
Yeah. That means that we're into the top 2 now, with 35.2 points in second place. It's one of Martyn's picks. And this is an American guitarist we've talked about as a member of a band on an episode before, but has now got a solo project out.
We have.
His name is MJ Lenderman, and he has an alternative country rock album out called Manning Fireworks. He was a member of the band Wednesday, who had their album Rats or God out, which was a pretty good album last year, I believe. And this is his solo project. Martyn, tell us a bit about this one.
Got a feeling I may have nominated a Wednesday album for a previous album of the year.
I think that
I'm pretty
it was
sure.
their debut record, wasn't it? Last year,
2020.
I'm pretty sure
it wasn't nominated. It was on my shortlist. It made my sort of top 20 records. It was.
I must have nominated something else. I came across this guy because he just kept popping up everywhere. And I was like, who is this MJ Lenderman guy? And then it was like, I found out he used to be a member of Wednesday, and he was in a relationship with the female member of the band, and they split up or something. And I was like, I'm interested in this person. And they
I thought he was still in Wednesday.
Yeah, I thought they were still together.
I think they're still together. He's still in Wednesday, and she pops up and sings on this record.
Yeah, she
does.
They're
Yes.
clearly on all right terms.
Isn't it? Oh, yeah. And maybe they are. I don't know.
What
but
internet
there
forums
was
did you
loads of
get
stuff.
your information from, Martyn? It's logging into like
The bad ones.
I got all my info off this guy from Facebook.
Yeah. This guy called
Yeah.
Dave.
Sells secrets of the stars.
Dave down the pub
He
told
told
me
you.
that.
He also told you it was a drum and bass album.
He did, yeah. I was quite disappointed. But I was expecting some Goldie or something. All I got was some boring guitars. Oh my god!
Oh, bloody hell, man.
No.
Just play the fucking note. Oh, when's the drop coming?
I was interested because he got compared to the likes of Jay Mascis from Dinosaur Jr. and Neil Young. And I was like, that immediately caught my attention because they're both heroes of mine. And so I think I just pulled up on YouTube and it came straight away with She's Leaving You, which is the leading song. And that song just absolutely got wired into my fucking soul. It was just, I must have listened to that song several times on repeat because it was beautiful. Everything about that song is so gorgeous. The vocal delivery, the lyrics, the guitar work, that guitar solo in it. It's just, man, it's just absolutely stunning.
Right, right.
It's everything that I like about a good Neil Young song or a decent Dinosaur Jr. song is of that ilk. And I think his vocals as well, they're just very understated. He's not trying to sing. He's just getting it out there. He's getting his soul out there in a very kind of not insincere, in an authentic way, but without trying to overegg the pudding, without trying to go, oh, I'm some deep artist, man. He's just like almost having fun what he's doing.
Yeah, definitely.
He's enjoying it.
Did
That's what
Did
I
anyone
like.
else read the Anthony Fantano review of this album?
I deliberately avoided it because I didn't want to go into it with his influence, in my opinion.
I have read his review. He
didn't like it, did he?
absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
I think it's one of his lowest scoring albums of the year by a long way. I really enjoyed this album. I gave it one of the highest scores I gave any of Martyn's picks. Let's just be really clear on that. I really like it.
You scored it 8.4.
I did. The way it opened, his vocal on Manning Fireworks, if you'd have told me that was a Neil Young track from the 70s, I'd have probably believed you. But then the melody's kind of Bob Dylan-esque. Then he's got Joker Lips, which has a bit more Jason Molina influence and less of the Neil Young. And then he's got, then in the rockier bit in Rudolph, it's got real Built to Spill vibes going on. And I was like, yep, I'm down for this. And then I'm like, oh, he's been compared to Dinosaur Jr. When's the ripping solo coming? And then he brings it in the solo wristwatch. And I'm like, yep, there we go. And then there's On My Knees, which is like pure Neil Young and Crazy Horse with the pummeling drums. And I'm like, yep, this is great. And then it ends with 6 minutes of feedback, which is completely unnecessary. But I love the fact he had the balls
I quite
to do
like
it. It's completely
I get like
unnecessary.
2 minutes into it and I'm like, oh yeah, it's just 6 minutes of feedback.
Yeah.
It's completely unnecessary. But there are some criticisms that Anthony Fantano makes that stop this album bit that are the reasons why this album probably isn't a 10. And they are that the instrumentation, the songs are great. The instrumentation is simplistic, deliberately, but it's why Fantano didn't like it. And I think that's a fair comment for him to make. He points out MJ Lenderman isn't a superb vocalist. He isn't. I really like his voice, but other people won't.
Dylan's not a superb vocalist.
Yeah.
And he gets like 10s.
Not Freddie Mercury.
In the 60s.
Bob Dylan has also released some of the worst albums of all time, and MJ Lenderman has not yet released anything bad. Let's just be clear on that. If you want to hear one of the worst albums of all time, legitimately, Bob Dylan's Christmas album has got to be up there with a shout, right?
Oh, I haven't listened to that, but I've got to wait until December to
no,
listen
just
to
put
that.
it on now and just be triggered.
No.
No. The main criticism that Fantano has that I do agree with is there are a lot of people when you read. So I tend to read a lot of reviews of the albums of the album of the year because I want to know. I don't want to make an unfounded statement. Now,
I do when it's an album I listen to a lot, but if it's something I don't know very well, I don't want it to influence my opinion.
See, I'd listen to the album like 4 or 5. I'd listen to all the records 4 or 5 times before I read the other reviews. And I found the lyrics. I'd heard a lot of people say how deep the lyrics are. And then you read the lyrics to Rudolph and you're a bit like, it's not that deep. It's about their non sequiturs. They fit very nicely. They have a really nice sound to the lyrics. But they're not, they are all, when taken in isolation, it is just a series of non sequiturs that rhyme.
It's that bit that builds on the Bob Dylan song, isn't it? How many roads must a man walk down?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love his melody. His vocal melodies are lovely, and there are some bits in it, and I'm just like, yeah, this is amazing. And it's just it's just a vibe. This album is a vibe, but he is not the second coming of Bob Dylan or Neil Young as a lyricist. As a vocalist,
No, I didn't get that.
quite possibly. As a musician, quite possibly. His work with Wednesday's fantastic, and this album is a great vibe. But he isn't the next songs are higher in terms of the way he's putting his lyrics together.
No,
And that's why it's an 8.
absolutely
That's
not.
why it's an 8, not a 9.
I
but then again,
There's so much of that alt country that Jason Molina was doing, especially in his later years. And to sound as similar to Jason Molina as he does, I'm willing to forgive the worst lyrics. I'm willing to forgive the fact that he's not identical to Jason Molina, because this is the closest I'm coming to getting another Jason Molina song album for last year.
Yes, it is.
If I can get something close to more Jason Molina, then that's never a bad thing.
Yeah.
And also, surely lyrics are something that are very personal, and that
They're subjective
even though
as
they may
hell.
be non sequiturs, they're subjective, and you can get meaning from non sequiturs. Like Interpol, they're one of my favourite bands, and all of their lyrics are non sequiturs. They're not saying anything meaningful, but you find meaning in them because they will fit. They'll fit something within you that you're experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, look at the lyrics on Talking Heads records like "Remain in Light." It's literally just strings of nonsense, but you find things in songs like "Naive Melody," "This Must Be the Place," where you take little bits of the lyrics and you make them mean something. And I think this is one of those records. It's not Bob Dylan poetry, but it's something.
We don't need it spelled out to us
almost
sometimes.
doing the Burroughs approach of taking up established poetry like Bob Dylan and cutting them up and making them into non sequiturs. But I think as an art form that still has merit.
Don't get me wrong. I liked this album. I clearly this record, and I have listened to it. I've put on a CD in the car. I have Pedro the Lion and then MJ Lenderman next to each other, one after the other, and I have had that in the car. That and Foxing have been the two main albums I've had in the car. That, and I've also got Mount Eerie, but you can't fit the whole record on one CD, which is really annoying. So I've got one track missing off the end of the record. So I really enjoyed this album, but I think I feel like I need to justify why it's an 8, not a 9 or above, because it could so easily be. He's so close.
Yeah, I don't think you need to worry about justifying. I don't think you need to justify why I've scored it an 8.4 and not a 9. I scored it lower. I scored it an 8.2. I think it's an A record, and considering this is an alt country album, that's not something I really have a lot of familiarity with at all. I've listened to some Red House Painters, some sort of slowcore and all that kind of things, but
you've got to have listened to Wilco's Yankee Hotel Foxtrot.
Yes, I have. I don't really recognise. That's not really alt country though. That's just indie for me.
It is alt country.
Especially
It's
with the weird
alt country.
Is it? Okay. I just thought it.
Same as like My Morning Jacket.
I really like
as well.
that album. Yeah, again, I like that. But, it's certainly one of the better country releases of the year, though.
There's an overlap between alt country and Americana.
Yeah, that's the same
alt country. They're pretty much a similar thing.
Any more to say about MJ Lenderman or this album?
No. Two-spot, totally fair. I do prefer Pedro the Lion personally, but I think I'm the only one out of the four who did.
This was a good album. It did impress me. It's not really my genre.
I'm still kind of shocked that I knew MJ Lenderman would be quite high. I'm still shocked Metzger. I didn't even think that would get in.
Yeah.
It's time to reveal who won it, isn't it?
Sure.
I wonder what's next. Let's find out, maybe. I'm going to leave that in.
Let's
not.
Find out.
Let's go home. Let's end it here, shall we?
We all know what's won, surely.
You've all
I reckon we've all figured it out.
Worked out. But I've been a little bit mischievous with this one because this is Tom's pick. They're a Canadian band.
Oh, I haven't figured it out then.
They're a Canadian band that you've all heard of, and they put out an album last year that has no title. It does have a title. The title was No Title as of 13th of February 2024, 28,340 dead, and it is by Godspeed You Black Emperor. The reason why I've been mischievous here is because this was actually my album of the year, and I scored it a 10. But I knew Tom was going to pick it, so I didn't take up one of my picks with it. And so essentially we all win. Because I thought this was incredible for various reasons. I think musically, it's more of that post-rock. It's more of that cinematic instrumental. There's no words. Everything is given, and you're expected to just sit and listen to it and think of what the imagery evokes with it. And of course, with such a controversy-laden title as that, it's going to bring to mind the atrocities in Gaza. And now we're in a position now where we've had a ceasefire, however temporary that's probably likely to be. But this certainly drew eyes and ears towards the right things. So I think that thematically what they were trying to do was really important, really bold in an industry which really doesn't give much of a voice to the Palestinian people. Then to back it up when I listened to it, and it just sounded incredible with all these kind of melting guitar lines, and it sounds like war and peace at the same time. And I just thought everything about this deserves to be... I've never given a 10 on this show before, and it's probably not musically my favourite thing that I've listened to ever, but it's got to be up there with your Sign of the Times, your Purple Rains, your Cars debuts. It's because it's so good, and what it's trying to say is also so important, that I think that both of those things together, there's nothing I can mark this record down on.
No.
Yeah, your winners for the 2024 album of the year, Godspeed You Black Emperor.
It's not good that I've got 3 in a row now.
Yeah.
This is a band 30 years into their career. So they started out in 1994. There's a cassette that I've never been able to get hold of, and you can get MP3 rips off the internet and nobody knows if they're legitimate or not because only about 4 people have the cassette. Then there's the album that came out in 1997, which was brilliant. And this band have always been important to me. So first record, I was given it on cassette. My piano teacher burned the album onto a cassette, gave that to me. Their second album came out, Lift Your Skinny Fists Like Antennas to Heaven.
That's just a great record.
It's just a great record. And then there's like Slow Riot for New Zero Canada. And then there's Yankee UXO, which on the back has a map of how record labels fund the arms industry or something, isn't it? In the inner folds. They've always been prone to political statement. Yeah. And then in 2005, just as I was old enough really to start going and watching them gig, because let's face it, they were never going to play Exeter and Plymouth, they disbanded and disappeared. And then I was lucky enough to see them at All Tomorrow's Parties when they reformed, which is a music festival that used to be held in Butlins in Minehead. And somebody needs to bring that fucking thing back. It was great. Because the year that Godspeed You Black Emperor played there, I think was the year it was curated by Sonic Youth. And I remember I went a few years and I saw Shellac and like Modest Mouse and Godspeed You Black Emperor and Les Savy Fav and all these bands who were really arty, clever indie bands in Minehead Butlins. It was incredible. And they did a Christmas party.
Normally it's just bears walking around hammered.
They did All Tomorrow's Parties Christmas party, which was headlined by Battles and Gary Newman, and it was fantastic. But yeah, so they reformed in 2009 and they made quite a few records, and all of them followed the same pattern, which was they'd stopped doing any vocal samples on their records, and it was 2 extended tracks and 2 noise pieces. And on the CD, it would go long one noise. And on the vinyl, you'd get like a 7-inch with the 2 noises and the 12 with the 2 extended tracks. And that was roughly the format from about 2009 onwards. And then this time, they've thrown that out the window and gone, even when the noise experimentations are going to be part of the extended pieces, we're going to do 3 extended pieces this time instead of the traditional 2. They've brought the spoken word samples back in. Not much, but there's a little bit of that, not loads, but more than there has been. And on Lucifer and Towers, which was a couple of years ago, they got melody back. They were much more melodic. And they
got their groove back.
Well,
it's like a 90s movie.
They've never been that melodic, but they've got more melodic with age. And this album is much more melodic. So they're trying to find ways of musically displaying the cataclysm while being melodic and not descending into noise. There's a moment, I think it's one of the tracks. It's which ones is it? It's Raindrops Cast in Lead.
That was my favourite.
Yeah, the melody just starts to disintegrate. And on previous records, they'd have just gone into noise. But this time they hold it together and make this kind of almost folk party music out of it. And like Broken Spires at Dead Capital, they take this kind of minimalist strings-led approach. Whereas on previous records, the melody would disappear into noise, which would be for like 7 or 8 minutes. And this time it's only a few seconds and then they're coming back. And then I think it was Grey Rubble, Green Shoots reminded me. My favourite Godspeed You Black Emperor track is Piss Crowns Are Trebled from Asunder Sweet and Other Distress, which was about 2011-ish, I think. And Grey Rubble, Green Shoots hits those the same types of peaks. So yeah, it's really nice to hear a band this far into their career still making music that's relevant and still making political statements, even though they're not doing it by being Billy Bragg. They're just putting it on their album cover and going, "This is what we believe in." And I remember
there's not any kind of rhetoric involved at all.
And what's really interesting about this is Ephraim Menoch went to a Hebrew day school. He's the person that you want to be making these statements publicly.
Like a Jewish voice.
Yeah, from that background going, this is wrong, stop it. To hear somebody, a prominent person with a Jewish voice saying that is bold, and it just epitomises what Godspeed have always been about. I love this record, and I've loved every Godspeed record, and I think that this time, this is a band that have managed to stay relevant and powerful for 30 years by subtly changing their sound over time to a way that it's still recognisably them. They still sound like Godspeed You Black Emperor, who no one else really, people try and sound like them, but nobody else has the number of bodies on stage to make that level with that kind of jazz sensibility. So yeah, I really liked it, and I will continue to love this band forever, and they will continue to be important to me, and I will continue going to see them live whenever I can, because I remember The Guardian once listed them as the number one band you need to see before you die, followed by Swans, and I agree with both of those. Go see, or more specifically with Swans, go and see them before they die.
I think with Swans, you have to go and see them in the past.
Oh, have they gone now, have they?
No, they haven't gone. Just we saw them at Arctangent, and actually no, it was way too intense. I had to leave. I had to stand outside the tent and listen to them.
Well, the thing is, that was tame compared to the time I saw them play in this tiny little place.
They used to be ridiculous, didn't they?
Yeah, it's so intense watching them live, and they're still that intense. Godspeed have an intensity live without volume. It's very strange. They're not loud. When you go and see them live, you think they're going to be this really loud thing, and they're really not. It's really controlled, and it's just...
I think that's reflected in this album. I don't think it's made up of almost like little suites that run onto each other, and you can discern all the multiple different segments of those suites. And so it's not noise. It's not like just harsh, discordant chords all the time. It's there's a lot of melody in there.
I've probably scored this the lowest of everyone.
You have indeed, yeah.
And yeah, so I've the only thing by Godspeed I've ever listened to before this was I think it was the album before they disbanded, Yankee UXO. Is that the one, Tom?
Yankee UXO was their last album before they split up. So that's probably third album. I think that's the
only album I've listened to. So I was expecting more of that. And I love that album, by the way. I got middle of the road post rock. And I know Tom's going to be very upset with me for saying that it's middle of the road post rock.
I can't really understand how you can have middle of the road post rock, because it's all larger than life.
Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't feel to me that this is a brilliant Godspeed album. It could be done by any one of a handful of post rock bands. Not that it's not good post rock. It's just it's very safe as post rock goes, and it doesn't do any of the like really exciting things that post rock sometimes does.
I can see what you mean. I think that may be intentional in that I think this is designed to be their almost way more accessible than the title would lead to believe from that. I mean,
maybe this is just back to what we were saying at the start. It's an album, and you have an expectation when you listen to it. This album didn't meet my expectation.
No. Having followed this band for a long time, I don't expect noise and fire and brimstone anymore, which is what you used to get. You didn't get it so much on their first record, which is very cut and paste musically. But on Lift Your Skinny Fists and Yankee UXO, it's real kind of fire and brimstone and pummeling. And there's that bit off Lift Your Skinny Fists that's on... Oh no, it's off their first album. There's one heavy bit on the first album that's on the soundtrack to everything. It's 28 Days Later uses it.
Yeah.
And then they came back, and you should go back to A Sun to Sweeten Others' Distress and the album before that, whose name escapes me, the 2009 album with Mladic on it. Those two albums are incredible and still quite heavy. And they've mellowed out.
Lucifer and Towers?
Yes, Lucifer and Towers.
That fact has been checked.
There you go. And then they did Lucifer and Towers. Oh, no, sorry. No, it's earlier than that. The 2009 album is...
so there's Alleluia, Don't Bend Ascend.
Alleluia, Don't Bend Ascend. That's the
From
one.
2012, yeah.
2012, yeah. So it's when they reformed, they released it a few years after. And I think that they've progressively got mellower, because there was Lucifer and Towers 2017, God's Plea at State's End, which I'm sure I nominated for Album of the Year in 2021.
Because the last one I listened to was A Sun to Sweeten Others' Distress a long time ago.
I love that record.
And I've listened to
my favourite Godspeed
Lift
album.
Your Skinny Fists Like Antennas to Heaven, which is my favourite. And F
sharp, A sharp, Infinity.
Yeah, that's a good album.
Which has a different track list on CD to vinyl.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh.
They've
I hate when they do that. I hate when that happens.
They're completely cut, but they were released on different labels. The CD was released on Cranky and the vinyl was released on Constellation. Yes, I am a Godspeed You Black Emperor nerd, and I don't care. I had everything they ever released on vinyl. I've been selling my record collection, but I had all of it. I even had the tiny little 7-inch split with Pan Am that was only released on with a magazine in Canada. It's all gone now. It's nearly all gone. Yeah, so Lucifer and Towers was a bit more mellow in 2017, but yeah, this album is more in their mellow vein. And I still love it because their strings players are fantastic. And I'm here for that.
Martyn, take us home.
Sorry, I zoned out for the last 20 minutes.
What were we talking about again? Sorry, I was just on my phone ordering a trifle with some chicken nuggets.
Trifling chicken nuggets. No, I'm only joking. I'm only joking. I like to see how passionate someone is in a band because you feel it. For me, I'll get to the album itself in a minute, but I want to go to something that Jim said, and it is something. Now, I used to be massive shoegaze man, shoegaze through and through, everything shoegaze, and post rock as well. And as I got sick of shoegaze because it was so prevalent, and there was a lot of people doing it because it was quite easy to do. Same with post rock. Got sick of post rock. There's so many people. Yeah, let's make it orchestral and make it build a crescendo and not have any lyrics, vocals in it. And it became a template, right? Now, Godspeed don't fit that template. Of course they don't. I do get what Jim is coming at in a sense that it's not innovative music
Godspeed
anymore.
Made
right?
the
It simply
template.
isn't.
Godspeed made the template with Mogwai in 1997.
Yeah, I get that. I do know that. I don't need to be told that because I was into Godspeed and Mogwai back in the day, right? But what I'm saying is now in 2024 or 2025, that template has become old, right? In much the same way that the people copying Slowdive and My Bloody Valentine do now is, but we've already got My Bloody Valentine and Slowdive. That's not a criticism. Now, this is where me and Tom again differ in how we approach an album. Tom will look at it analytically as well as how it emotionally impacts him, because this is one of his favourite bands of all time. Whereas I listen to it in the car with Tom on the way to a gig.
With him talking all the way through.
No, I don't.
That was amazing.
I don't do
no,
that.
it actually.
I know.
He didn't do that. It was pure silence. I think we sat in silence pretty much the entire, except when you had road rage. But that's
Tom doesn't have road rage.
Oh,
oh my god!
when he's done 100 hours of driving for the band in the last year, he does very much.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, we're driving through the south of England, some of the most beautiful scenery in the world, really. And it's very safe and it's very, homely and everything. And we're listening to this album, which the kind of purpose of it is to draw awareness to some of the most horrific things we'll ever see in humanity, right? And that really brought it home to me. Musically, I thought it was fucking fantastic. But I scored this a 10, by the way, because I think it deserves it. But I think if this was just another album by Godspeed without that political kind of element to it, it wouldn't be. I think that when I was listening to it with the knowledge of what the title meant, and that added to it. Without that knowledge, I would have just gone, Yeah, this is a pretty good post-rock album. I wouldn't have gone, this is a 10 out of 10 album.
I think I agree with that. If you didn't tell me what I was listening to, I would enjoy it, but I wouldn't give it a 10 out of 10. I gave it the 10 out of 10 because of how the message they were aiming for, and they did nothing with the music that made me go, actually, that's disrespectful to the Palestinian people, and it sounds really good. Yeah.
Maybe all that's why I missed the point of this record, because I didn't really pay much attention to the title and I just stuck on my headphones, which I do for most albums.
Yeah.
And
which I think proves my point there.
I didn't have any idea there was any relation to Gaza or what's been going on in the Middle East.
Sometimes that can probably be the best way to listen to an album, to really get an idea of what it's about from almost a neutral perspective. But yeah, I couldn't do that once I'd seen what the album title was and what it was referring to. Yeah, it was always going to be something that I was intensely interested to see what it sounded like. And then when I did enjoy it, yeah, I was like, I've got to give it a 10. It does what it set out to achieve.
It deserves the top spot this year.
Yeah, I feel like they are worthy winners, and it's a worthy cause.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very surprised that Kendrick didn't make the top 10.
Somebody tanked it.
I completely tanked it.
Somebody scored it like a 3.
I thought it was such a disappointing album.
You scored it lower than I scored Katy Perry's album this year. That's ridiculous.
Well, I'll tell you the
flabber
reason.
Was so gasted, I have to go on antibiotics just to ungast it.
I'll tell you the reason. So I had it on while I was painting this room, actually, and it was all just mediocre. And then it got to a track, and this track was fucking incredible. And I was like, this is by far the best song on the album. So I run to my laptop. What is this song? I need to remember which song this was. And it was Saint Chroma by Tyler, the Creator, because it had finished the album and started playing something else at random.
Yeah, I'm surprised Tyler, the Creator, didn't do better either.
Yeah. When I said that we all worked out what the top album was, I was expecting it to be Tyler, the Creator.
I did call that Mount Erie wouldn't make the top 10.
That was 2024 Album of the Year. We will be back at some point in the future. Whether these guys will be with me or not, who knows? But we've got a lot of music to discuss in 2025. So what did you think of our Albums of the Year? Let us know in the comments below and like the video. But the most important thing is to stay funky for 2025.
Let's find out.
Let's find out.